All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Wife Like Me podcast. I'm your friend and host, Amanda Davison. It's so good to be with you. We are diving into a new topic. Just kidding. It's not. It's a book, though, that we have not yet talked about, The Merge for Marriage by Carrie Trent Stageberg. Welcome to A Wife Like Me. You're a new friend.
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda. I'm so honored and blessed to get to be here.
I love the subtitle of your book, Turning Frustration and Disunity into Closeness and Commitment. Hello. I was just preparing actually for a message I'm giving next month, and I was looking at all these stats, and there was, well, obviously you're probably familiar with the Gottman Institute, but one of
Yeah.
the important research that they did, it I think it was within the first 5.6 years of marriage, half of marriages will end,
Yep.
and those are can be linked to the 4 horsemen. Now I'm not gonna remember them all, even though I was just looking at them. But criticism, contempt, what are the other 2? Do you remember?
I don't remember the other 2, but there are the 4, and I actually do cite some of Dr. Gottman's research in this book because along with that, there's like 69% of those issues are because of our differences, which means they're not going anywhere. So it
Yes.
doesn't matter how, great we are, how wonderful we are. Those are inherent differences in who we are as people. And while that might seem really frustrating, I think that's good news because that means we can figure out how to value each other and say, all right, God put someone really different in our home, and help us through those 4 horsemen so
Yes.
that they're not an issue in our marriage.
Yes. The other 2, I just had to look 'cause it was gonna bother me if I didn't know, but
Yeah.
defensiveness and stonewalling.
Oh, yeah. Stonewalling. I should have remembered that one. That's like a
And did
pet
you
peeve.
know Yeah, I know. And then 80 I think it said like 85% of men stonewall. So
Mm.
typically the stonewallers, which are just like you shutting down, you're like, "No, what? Okay, well, never mind, I'm out. Peace."
Yep.
Like, "Oh, gotta go," you know?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
absolutely.
like retreat from this convo forever, like that's that
Yeah.
stonewalling type of thing. But it was just interesting. Anyway, I love that we need resources like yours that like help us turn from what's not working into something that is working.
Yeah.
So why don't you just give us a little background about who you are so we know who we're talking to?
Yeah, well, my name is Carrie, and I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I am an author and speaker, and I have the incredible privilege and honor of getting to help run a ministry called Strong Families with my dad. So it's really fun getting to do that. But most of all, I love the Lord, and I love how God has changed and redeemed everything in my life and getting to share that with others because it's possible. It doesn't matter where you are today or what things look like today. Hope, redemption, change, it's possible. And it starts with Jesus. So that's kind of just a quick blurb about who I am. But love helping people walk through those challenging moments and also the good moments.
Yes, because marriage is both.
It
And I
is.
think I think the tricky thing, like we just started talking about, is like when it becomes so like hard for a long time, we can get
Yeah.
so discouraged, especially if we're not finding like any way out, any sense of like, okay, we resolved a conflict or we talked about something hard without destroying each other. And like
Yeah.
also when it's hard for a long period of time, it can feel like, well, how's it gonna be good, Carrie? Like,
Absolutely.
whatever, Amanda, like we've been in this rut for so long. Both of us feel so cold toward each other that I just don't think it's possible, right? That's what
Yep.
many of us can be thinking and feeling, and yet there is hope. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Where did this book come from?
Well, that's a great question and actually a great segue into that because that was really where Joey and I found ourselves. We had been married about 6 months and it was never big things like integrity or honesty or anything like that. It was 1,000 small things. Like it was like death by a million paper cuts, and it just felt like no matter what we did, no matter what the topic was, no matter what the issue was, we could not get on the same page. And it just felt like, oh my gosh, how did we make a mistake? Are we ever going to be able to do this? Will things ever change? And so we did the only thing we could think of was which was reach out to some friends for help, and sat down with them over lunch, and we're like, okay, here's what's going on. What do we do? And they
Which
both started laughing, which
what
was
oh,
not what I wanted in that moment, because I was like, okay. And she was like, well, welcome to the merge. And
mm,
that was the moment where I was like, okay, what is this thing? What do we need to know? And it really was a turning point for us, because it was like, okay, it's the merge, it's not Joey and I. It was our first
mm,
step of realizing we need to become a team, and together we can beat this. But when we continue to do more of the same, which never brings change, and we're just attacking each other, we're never going to get out of that rut. So that was sort
mm.
of the catalyst, but it really started when we noticed how different we were.
Hello. Um,
Yeah.
I also love that you actually reached out to someone and said, "Hey, yeah, PS, we're not doing so hot over here. Like, it's not
Yeah.
so pretty." That's not common. I think we hide what's
Yeah.
hard. We don't wanna share with people that things are not awesome. And so I just want to encourage anyone listening or watching that that is the first thing that you did, maybe even the second, because you recognized, hey, we're
We have
not
a problem.
happy. This is
Yeah.
not working. Yep. Right, right, right. Like red flags, like things are not, we're not kind. We're both bitter. We're feeling on at each other's like, we're just rubbing up against each other in all the wrong ways. So that is beautiful that you reached out to someone and said, this is not working. Please help. Talk
Yeah.
about the merge more. When you
Yeah.
discovered that, like that's obviously the whole book, The Merge for Marriage. Talk to us about what that really is.
I think really what it is it's those series of events and decisions, and really the process of two people becoming one, which is not an easy thing to do. It sounds beautiful and poetic and romantic, but if you think of two rivers that combine together to become one mighty river, that's a lot of water and a lot of division that's having to come together to become something united and powerful. And also the enemy hates that. He doesn't want us to be united in our marriages. And so there's a lot of opposition to that. And I think for us, really, when I realized, oh my gosh, what in the world is going on, it was we'd been married exactly 2 weeks. And I came home, and Joey had literally just finished that day moving all of his stuff into the house that I'd been renting prior to us getting married. And, I was super excited to make dinner and have an awesome evening together. And I come in the door, and Joey peeks his head around the corner, and he has a headlamp on and these big yellow granny cleaning gloves. And I'm thinking, okay, like what happened? Is there like an acid spill? Is there a body downstairs? Like what is, like, where are we at on the scale of things? And so I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm just cleaning the downstairs sink. Like that was the most common, normal. And that was when I realized, okay, I have no idea who I married. Like we need a headlamp and some serious cleaning gloves to just casually clean on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And, that for me was the moment where I realized, like, oh my gosh, like Joey's not going home at night anymore. Is he going to expect me to clean with a headlamp? Because that's not who I am. And how
Mhm.
in the world are we ever going to get on the same page with all of this? And so, really, from there, though, it became a journey for us of saying, okay, we know what it is. It's the merge. There's this thing that we're up against, trying to become one, a united front, and really attached to each other. But how do we actually do it? And so that was the season that we launched into. And a lot of the couples that I interviewed in this book helped us through that process. We did a bunch of research. Thankfully, I'm married to a dad who's a marriage and family counselor. And then we began to do a lot of this with other couples, and watched it not only change us, but help other people as well. And so we really found that there were 5 things that can help us make this merge and actually become closer together. And the beautiful thing is we did this early in our marriage, but we're still doing it. We're in a season right now as a family. We were in a horrific car accident several months ago, and Joey was severely injured. Thank God he's alive and the boys are alive and I'm okay. But it's going to be a long journey for our family. And we're reworking through all of these things on a deeper level. But it's the basis for, okay, we have a plan. We have something we can go back to that, the Lord and this that can help us navigate these hard things and come back to that. But it's
Mm.
those 5 things that we discovered that can really help us build attachment and get through the merge.
Okay, let's talk about the 5
That was
things.
a lot. I'm sorry.
No, don't be. Don't be. This is great. What are those 5 things?
Yeah, so the first I call them merge tools. So the first one is we call it stopping the merge NATO. And for us, really what that means is, and for so many of us, is we find ourselves having the same argument or discussion again and again and again, and we don't get anywhere. It's like we're spinning in circles. And we could be talking about something completely different, but somehow we end up right back in that same place. And so it's really helping us identify what's sucking us into that cycle. How do we stop it? And then what do we do to do something different? So that's the first tool. The second one is making mountains shrink. And really, what that's about is how can we build attachment and closeness with the person next to us? And really, where this came from is that there was an incredible study done on attachment. And what they did was they grabbed college students that were walking through the University of Virginia's campus, and there was a big hill in the middle of the campus. And so they had one person stand at the base of the hill. They put a huge backpack on them, and they had them indicate how hard and how high the hill was when they had to climb it by themselves. And every single person, without exception, overshot how high it was and how hard it was going to be to reach the top. Then they repeated that with someone that they were close to, whether it was a friend or a roommate or a significant other, whatever it was. And that person put on a backpack and stood next to them and put their hand on their shoulder. And every
Mm.
single time the hill shrank and how hard it was going to be to climb it shrank. And so, really, it's that idea of we're not alone facing these mountains. And how do we be high hill people for our spouse and really take a look at those challenges and say, it's still there. There's still a mountain, but man, we can climb it together. So,
Mm.
that's the second tool. The third is merging at the speed of joy. And there's a lot of neuro and clinical studies being done right now about attachment, which is a huge thing that we focus on at Strong Families. We have a tool called The Blessing that was actually my dad's doctoral thesis that's all about building biblical attachment. But what they're finding is that when we walk into a room and we see someone across the room and they're genuinely excited to see us, their eyes light up, that translates into our brain as joy, and it happens faster than we're able to think about it. And so it's really saying, how can we be people that when our spouse looks at us, they can see joy instead of, I'm tired, and it's hard. Like we've got 2 kids under 2, like
Mhm.
it's really hard to have joy
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's how can we find ways to bring joy and even fun and playfulness back into our relationship. The fourth tool is spotlighting our strengths. And my dad created a really fun tool with lions and otters and golden retrievers and beavers to help us understand who God has placed in our lives and in our marriage. And so it's really realizing, hey, we might be different, but God did that intentionally. And
Mm.
he placed us with this person to make us stronger, not to just frustrate us. So how can we get back to a place of valuing that? Because a lot of times when we're dating, we love those opposites. We love those things that are different. And then it's in our house forever. And we're going, I didn't really sign up for that, or I didn't realize it meant that. And so it's how can we get back to a place where we really value each other for who we were created to be? And then the final tool is untying the knot and repairing. And this one is probably the hardest, but it's also my favorite because there's so many studies that show that every relationship is going to experience challenges and they're going to experience breaks in our attachment. It's just the way that it is. We're humans, we're going to hurt each other. But it's actually the process of repair that makes us stronger. When we're able to do that, our attachment strengthens. And it can
Mhm.
actually double the strength of our attachment when we choose to repair. But what can keep us from doing that is literally we need to be able to forgive, to untie the knot, and to say, I'm willing to deal with these hard things so that we can go through that process of repairing with one another. So it's really those 5 things, and it might sound complicated, but I've put it into a map. We have a thing called the Merge map in the book that literally walks you through how you can do this together. There's date nights. I mean, we've tried to make it a fun process, even though there's some pretty deep stuff that you can get into within all of this.
That is what I love about the book, actually, that it's both. Because I do see all the time, and we've been there ourselves, where there's a heavy emphasis on one of these stages, right? Like maybe we're in a season of like we're having so much fun, da 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 da, and again, women are telling me this all the time. Like we have a lot of fun together, we get along really well, even, but there's some deep things there that we're just not talking about, or we haven't
Yeah.
resolved. So, or vice versa, like we're just so focused on the repair, the deep repair, and we're not having any fun, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's like an interesting balance there when I'm, as I was reading and then listening to you now, it's a little bit of everything, right? Like mixed in together, because we can have a lot of fun and even be talking about very hard things and forget that we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And like so
Absolutely.
it's like, oh yeah, all of these things really play a part. I would love to go back though for a minute for
Yeah.
those watching and listening. Stopping NATO. Can you describe that again? Like
Yeah,
it's
the
stopping
merge
the
NATO.
cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, stopping that cycle, right? That's
Yes.
how do we how can we stop that cycle? What's something today
Yeah.
that listeners and viewers can walk away with being like, "Oh, that's what Carrie talked about."
Yep.
Um, how do we
That's a
pick up
really
on that?
great question. For really, it starts with identifying what's beneath it. Because a lot of times when we find ourselves having that same cycle again and again and again, there's something deeper going on. It's not just because, which ours always seems to start over the dishwasher. I don't know why. Like someday they're going to make a self-loading dishwasher with like the perfect amount of dishes in it, and
I've
it can
literally
unload itself and stuff, and it'll like save half of our marital arguments. But it can start about something stupid,
same.
but it's something benign. And for example, like Joey would say, "Hey, did you unload the dishwasher?" That's a totally benign statement, and
Or
we would
is it?
end up
Or is it, Carrie?
or is it? Exactly, because that is not what I heard. I did not hear, "Carrie,
Right.
did you unload the dishwasher?" What I was hearing was, "You have failed, and you're such a failure that I'm probably gonna end up leaving you."
You're not
That
doing
was, like,
enough as a
literally, and that
mom.
exactly.
Right, right.
"How can
Fill in
you
the
be
blank.
failing at this? And man, you've failed at everything else too, so might as
And
well just call it quits." And
now you
that
can't
sounds
even do the
really
dishes.
dramatic,
Yep.
but it actually was what I was feeling. And so the first step really is saying, "Okay, what is the deeper thing going on here?" And the reality is I had been married before. It was an incredibly abusive situation. And literally, when Joey was telling me something benign, or even saying like, "Hey, can we work on this?" Or, "That hurt, you did something and it hurt me," like really healthy and very benign things, what I was hearing was Joey's gonna end up bailing out on me. So it was really the deeper need was is I needed to know that Joey wasn't going anywhere. And so when we were able to kind of figure that out, Joey would literally start the conversation, even though it sounds stupid and it sounds crazy. If he was going to ask me to unload the dishwasher, he'd say, "Carrie, I want you to know I love you and I'm not going anywhere. And I just need you to know that. And hey, were you able to unload the dishwasher?" And something about hearing that up front kept me from going to that place of spinning. And then I'd suck him right into that cycle with me. And Joey has his too. We all sort of have those things that all of a sudden we're defensive or we're frustrated or we're shut down or whatever it is. But for me, I just kept feeling like, "Oh my gosh, I've failed and my husband's not going to love me anymore." Because that was what had happened previously. It was all dependent on my performance, and I could never get it right, which is again not what Joey was communicating, but that's what I was hearing. So
Yeah.
so much of the merge. So I would say start with identifying, okay, when they say that and I start to have that reaction, what's really going on? What am I really hearing them say? 'Cause I
Another
guarantee you it's probably not, "Did you unload the dishwasher?"
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, um, I would phrase that in a way of saying, like, what's the insecurity I'm feeling when they say that? Like, what's
Yep,
the insecurity I jump to?
yep,
What's the underlying fear? What am I so
right,
afraid of by when they make that statement or point that
right.
out or do that thing or when they go there or
Absolutely.
do that or don't do that or whatever. What am I so
Yeah.
afraid of, really? Yeah.
Or even, is this creating a reaction because there's something we haven't dealt with? And it just keeps
Mm.
reminding me that that's lingering.
Mm.
Maybe there's something we need to repair because every time I hear that, I'm just back in that place of hurt. So,
Yep.
absolutely. So I'd say that's the place to start, and then really it's going, "Okay, how can we put in a warning system so that we're not just getting sucked into that cycle?"
Mm. Can you give us an example of what that might like, what might a warning system be?
Yeah, so Joey and we started calling our merge NATO Double Trouble, because he would say something and I felt like I was in trouble, and then we'd get into trouble because we'd start arguing. And
Yeah.
so it kind of became a humorous way of being able to say, like, "Hey, I see double trouble," or, "There's double trouble ahead," or what. We kind of just kind of had, like, literally would call it out, and then both of us were aware, like, that's actually what's going on. This is not about the dishwasher. This is not about anything other than, "Hey, man, Carrie's feeling like she needs to be validated," and, Joey can present that to her. And then it's a choice. And so much of merging and relationships really are a choice. Joey had to make the choice to say, "Man, it might feel really silly to tell you that I'm not going anywhere because you didn't unload the dishwasher." But I needed to hear that. And we don't have to do that now as much. Like, I hear it the way that it's intended because it was built in that, "Hey, there's nothing that you can do that's going to make me bail out or forget to do that's going to make me bail out." But I needed to hear that for a season to really know that. And so it's that choice of saying, "Okay, I'm going to choose to give my spouse that validation or to slow down and really hear what's going on and say, okay, how can I present this in a way where you hear it the way that I'm intending it to be heard?"
Hmm.
And then choosing to do that, which is not
Yep.
always easy, especially when those emotions get thrown into things.
Yep. Yep. That's helpful. And then I'd love to chat. You mentioned your dad came up with the lions, otters, golden retrievers, and beavers. Can we
Yes.
talk about that? Because I
Yes.
think that's helpful for us wives, all of us, though, husbands too, if you're
Yeah.
watching.
It's an incredibly fun tool, called the Connect Assessment, and you can find it at strongfamilies.com, which is our website. And you can actually take it, and it'll give you a graph back of your reports. You can actually know what animal you are. But he created this, and it's something we use all the time. We actually train coaches in this too, so it's a really fun thing. But lions are really take charge. They're pretty assertive. They're the boss, or at least they think they are. If you're a
Mhm,
mom and you've got a lion child, these are the kids that get energy arguing with you.
mhm,
Or, the spouse that thinks that stoplights are a tool of Satan. So they'll drive through the parking lot just to keep moving. But they're great people. They're great to have in a relationship. And then we've got otters, which are basically parties waiting to happen. So they're fun loving, they're joyful, they're optimistic, they love to start things. They don't really finish very much, but they love to start things. And, they know thousands of people. They just don't know anybody's name. But they have their best work friend, their best elevator friend, their best church friend, their best "I'm about to meet you" friend. So they're just the life of the party and add a lot of joy, and optimism to situations and to relationships. And then we've got golden retrievers, and these are, loyal and compassionate and caring and great at seeing people who are hurting, and peacemakers, wonderful at finding that and helping people kind of come together. And I do want to be clear before I go any further, you can lead from any of these places. It just looks different. I think so often we've been told, well, you've got to be that lion dominant personality to be a leader. And the reality is you don't. And
right.
my dad actually did something really recently with the military. There's a lot I've supposed to have been at, but I have not been able to because of the accident. But it was a group of paratroopers. So these are hardcore, jump out of a perfectly good plane, tip of the spear, military men and women in our military, and he did something for them, and all of them except for two, who were the officers in charge, were golden retrievers.
Hmm.
And they not only wanted to get the job done, but they wanted to bring people home. They were there
Hmm.
for the team, to be with people. So again, you don't have to be one type to lead. Everyone can lead from these different places of strength.
Yeah.
And then we have what are called beavers, and these are God's little architects. They are detailed and precise and follow the rule book, or actually, in my opinion, they probably wrote the rule book or
Hmm.
the instruction manual, because otters would have thrown it out or didn't realize that there was one. And they're great at, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. Or, if you're living with a hyper beaver, you can tell by just going into your garage. And it's not the little ball that comes down, but we actually had a gentleman that not only had a ball, but he had turned it into an emblem of the car. And when you got out of the car and it went up, so the weight adjusted, it would rest perfectly where it was supposed to be on the vehicle. So if you're living with a hyper beaver, just go in your
Yeah.
garage.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
you put
funny.
all that together and it's wild kingdom. But it's also wonderful how God has created each of us with these unique and fantastic strengths
Yeah.
to encourage each other.
So I'm curious what you and your husband, what are you
Yeah.
each? What animal?
So we all tend to be kind of a combination. So I'm a lion otter, so I lead the way to the party, or I'm really serious about the amount of fun that we're going to have when we get there.
Mm.
And Joey is much more of a golden retriever. And
Mm.
just to highlight those differences, I mean, Joey is so ridiculously, unbelievably kind, but I also noticed that my delivery on things could absolutely get him to shut down, because I'm pretty direct. And why sugarcoat things? There's no time for that. Let's just say what we mean. And I would say something and I could just see Joey deflate.
Mm.
And I realized, man, I've got to start changing my delivery, not what I'm saying and not who I am, but I need to start saying things in a softer and kinder way if I want Joey to really feel like he can engage in our relationship. And that's one thing that we've built into these animals, is the ability to bend. And that's the ability to say, you know what? It doesn't mean that I'm not a lion anymore. It just means that I need to do the most loving thing for the other person, which is what Jesus did. He was a perfect blend of all of these animals, and he chose to be whatever animal the person in front of him needed in that moment.
Mm.
And, I had to soften my delivery, and it made a huge difference in allowing Joey to feel safe to engage in our relationship.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I am you. I'm an otter lion, I would say. More of an otter than a lion, but I love a good party and I am most concerned about the amount of fun that we're going to have, which
Exactly.
again, it's like so helpful to know what you are because then you're like, "Oh wait, that there's times when that's not helpful." Like
Yep.
our kids actually should probably get their homework done.
Yep.
And like
Well, and our greatest strengths pushed to an extreme can become a weakness. And it's
yeah.
helpful to know that and say, yep, okay, I've got to balance this out a little bit.
Exactly. I know, and then my husband is for sure a beaver. And so that's, like, super interesting in our marriage,
Yeah,
because he's so oriented and so motivated toward those details that for me, I'm like, I don't even see the detail. Like, I don't even
100%.
yeah, I don't even recognize that there are lines within something that need to be, like, followed or again, like, you don't even notice there was a rule there.
Yep.
Also, I'm even offended that there are rules
I
sometimes.
know. Why would we need them? Like, that's not any fun.
They're so confining and
Exactly.
uncomfy for us, right? So, it's so fascinating, but also, like, I love that what you're helping couples to do is to see how that's helpful. We need whatever type of animal our husbands are, right? We
Absolutely.
need those strengths that because very likely, not always, but what those strengths are is could potentially possibly be our weakness. And
Yeah.
so what a beautiful thing to honor. I think what you know, y you help us remember that, like, how God designed us and our husbands,
Yeah.
it is beautiful. And so instead of forgetting that, as we often do. I'm just reminding myself as I'm saying this, right? Like, it's so good to remember that it is beautiful. And in marriage, it is actually for the benefit of the marriage and the family, right?
Absolutely.
It's that beautiful merging of the 2 that makes it so cool. And
Yep.
so we want the good things, and instead of being offended by how God made their brains to naturally operate, again, that's not a license to be it's not an excuse to be
Yeah.
rude or disrespectful or unloving, it's not that at all, but it's understanding like, "Oh, that's why you tend to see the details, the dishes,"
Absolutely.
going back I've written about that, how I don't even see that there's a right way to load the dishes, right? And so
100%.
I'm like, "It's just they're in there, it's probably gonna be good, it's probably gonna
Yeah.
work out just fine,"
You
not
were
really
lucky
worried.
that I actually knew we had a dishwasher, so I feel really good about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really proud that I even thought about it. Instead of letting them sit there and, like, going to watch a movie because that sounds way more fun, you know?
It does.
Adulting is hard. So, yeah, like, to really be like, "Oh, that's why he tends to see that the dishes could be the bowls are more, could be washed better on top," or, like,
Absolutely.
oh, that makes so much sense. So I just want to encourage anyone watching or listening. This is the type of stuff that I mean, if you're in the profession of counseling, if you are in the world of marriage help at all, you know that the preventative, proactive work and investment that you do for your marriage and yourself, the better it's going to be. Because if we just ignore, if we just don't actually do what you're doing right now, watching or listening to this episode, chances are you're really not investing in it much, and it's going to be more difficult than it had to be. And so, good job. And again, just take the time to learn about your
Yeah.
spouse, about yourself, so that you can have compassion too and help even maybe your husband understand why it is you see it differently. And that's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing, right? It's not bad. It's beautiful.
It
Um,
is.
so that's good. Did you have any thoughts on that? I don't know. I was
Yeah,
talking.
no, I think that's really good and really powerful, and I do think, again, it's keeping in mind that this is a choice. It's a choice to learn and to become a student of your spouse's strengths, and it's a choice to also say, "Okay, how can we use these in a way that's actually going to make our marriage and our family stronger as opposed to just operating as individuals." And the cool thing about the Connect assessment that we built into it is it really is built to be interrelational. So it is going to give you a picture of who you are, but it's also going to show you how those dynamics play out in relationship with others and how can you better communicate with somebody who's different than you,
Yeah.
because people hear things differently and they see things differently. And so it really is all about making those choices to say, okay, and for like lions and otters, we tend to be pretty fast paced. We want to make decisions yesterday, or what decision, so let's just get it over with so I don't have to think about it ever again. And we can tend to be moving so fast that we forget to deal with problems and issues effectively. And golden retrievers and beavers tend to slow down and they want to know all the details and gather all the information and all of that. Well, both are really good things, but we need both, right? Because can you go so slow that you miss a deadline? Are
Mhm.
you ever really going to have enough information to make a completely risk free decision? No.
Right.
But can you go the other direction and you're going to make really poor decisions because you didn't ask some hard questions or slow down to get some of that information or realize, oh, this actually affects other people, not just me. So you can kind of, as you start to really unpack how can we use this together, it's inviting that other person in and
Yeah.
saying, okay, what do you see? What are, how would you approach this, and then figuring out how can we do this together. So it's a choice and it's work, but it's so valuable when we do that. And it's fun. It actually becomes fun. And the animals are a fun way to do that. And they've become a way to take pressure off for Joey and I too. Like he can look at something that I like didn't see, the mess that I just don't see, and he's like, "You're such an otter." And it's
Mhm.
funny, and I'm like, "Okay," like oh, you just double cleaned that for no reason, like you're such a beaver kind of a thing. And
Mm,
it becomes a way to kind of take the pressure off and be able to say like, okay, this is who you are. And then it's a great reminder to say, how can I step towards them in a way that lets them know that I'm not just set in who I am, but I actually want to bend.
yeah. It's just that basic compassion, like a care
Yeah.
for who they are, right? And then respecting and honoring how God made them and us,
Yep.
right? Um, I'd love to talk about, I know you were in a previous relationship,
Yeah.
marriage, correct? That
Yep.
was abusive. And
Yes.
we talk with, I talk with so many wives every single day, as I'm sure you do,
Yeah.
who are maybe even unsure that they're in an abusive relationship. Would you
Yep.
mind just sharing whatever you want to share with us to better equip not only, because if you are not, or don't question if you're in an abusive relationship, please continue to listen, because what I find in the Christian culture oftentimes is that the because Christians aren't educated, then we dismiss it, we negate it, like, no, that, or we even just cover over it with spiritual bypassing and don't take it
Yeah.
seriously, and then therefore we're not actually helping. So
Yeah.
would you just share about that experience and whatever you want to share with wives to help them identify abuse?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think too, along with that is if you're not in an abusive relationship, I guarantee you, you know someone who is.
Yes.
Just statistically, you do.
Yep.
Even if all of your friends are from church or Christian circles, you know someone that is. And so, knowing those warning signs are really, really important as we can, help other people. So I know for me, I grew up in an amazing family, and my dad, like I said, runs a nonprofit, and I grew up every day knowing that my family and the Lord were crazy about me, but it really was a choice. And I chose the harder path, which was the world's definition of what value was. And so there was a really long season where I walked away from faith and family, and I ended up eloping, shocking my whole family, which is probably like not the best thing to do when you have a dad in marriage and family ministry. Um,
Wait, you're such
and
an otter, though.
I know. Why would I
So
ever think through the consequences of my decision? It just sounded really fun.
okay.
So, yep,
Um,
and, I ended up finding myself, smack dab in the middle of an abusive relationship, and it was abusive in any way that you can possibly imagine, and the Lord literally rescued me out of that. I like I said, I wasn't walking with him, but, he showed up and literally rescued me out, and I'm so honored and blessed to get to help others identify, get out, and heal now. That's a huge part of what I do, but, I think the and I'll be honest too, I had no idea that it was abuse either. I was not familiar with it. It was not common. People weren't talking about it. I didn't know a single other person who had been in an abusive relationship. I had no idea, and it was actually a family member, another family member that gave me a book called The Verbally Abusive Relationship, and I read it 3 times, underlined almost everything, and it was, like, verbatim things that I was being told, and I remember going, "Okay, there's no way I'm in an abusive relationship," even though I'm
mm,
staring at the evidence right there, and so it can take a while for our brains to really process, "This can happen to me," or, "This is what's actually happening," and it's kind of, I think one of the hardest parts is wrapping our minds around the fact that someone I love is choosing to make these decisions, because
yep.
there's always a really great reason why they did it, or why we
Yeah.
deserved it, or why it should have happened. But what I want you to hear is if you're in that situation, you have done nothing to deserve it. It's not okay, and it is abuse, and that doesn't mean that your life is over, that there's no hope, that you did something wrong. It being able to acknowledge what's going on is the first step in the Lord being able to show up for you and to get you some help and some hope. And that would be my next piece of advice is if that's going on, don't hesitate to do that. Do it safely. Your safety is the most important thing, but don't hesitate to reach out. The domestic violence hotline is a great place to start. There's other great and fantastic resources, but I think to know, is it abuse, is a really great question. And there's different types of abuse. Verbal and emotional are the ones that we're probably least familiar with because they are great at masquerading as other things. And they're also the most psychologically confusing.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, there are so many things that happen where, like, for example, I remember there was one time where I washed his socks and he came home and was incredibly angry and chewed me out and called me a whole slew of names because I washed his socks. And so the logical response is, well, okay, I just won't do that in the future, right? So the next week I didn't wash his socks and the response was exactly the same. And so you start to go, am I crazy? How, like, what am I doing wrong? How do I fix, like, the rules keep changing. Also just the gaslighting, I never said that. I would never do that. You totally imagined that. We never had that conversation. I never said that to you. I really started to think I was crazy because I was going, well, I guess maybe you didn't say that and we didn't. But all of those things are real and happening. And even just the name calling, the threats, I mean, there's so many things that go into verbal and emotional abuse. But really, if you feel like you can't talk to your partner about something, that's a red flag. If you say something to your partner and the response is unproportional in anger or threats, or they completely sidestep the topic and all of a sudden it's your fault for bringing something up, these are all red flags and things that you need to look at. And um no one is perfect in a relationship. We all get angry, we all have our moments, but when it is a pattern, that's abuse. Abuse is a pattern, and it's important, again, to start digging into that and going, okay, what am I experiencing? um and then, we're all a lot more familiar with the physical abuse. But one thing I didn't realize was that it doesn't have to be like, I thought, well, he's never hit me, so it's not physical abuse. That's not true at all.
Right.
And even the threat of physical violence is physical abuse. So if that's been threatened, you are no longer in the verbal abuse camp. You have been physically abused. Even
Yeah.
keeping you from leaving a room, blocking your way, throwing things, pinning you down, all of those things are physical abuse. And or even threatening the safety of other people is physical abuse, even if they're not you, other people. And so those are all really important things to take into consideration. And again, no matter where things are today, there is hope.
Yeah.
And things do not have to stay the way that they are, but you have to be willing to let somebody else, somebody safe, into that process with you to get that help.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope that was it's a lot to try to condense into one
No.
slew, but yeah, it's
Yes. And that, like, those, I think, trickle into other areas of like spiritual abuse
absolutely.
where, you're maybe even threatened by some sort of spiritual
Yeah,
concept that almost like using it as a weapon, as a tool to control or manipulate.
yep,
Sexual abuse,
100%.
any time where you
And
are
you can be sexually abused if you're married. I do wanna be really clear on that. You are not under an
absolutely.
obligation to do anything sexually, and you are not under obligation to have it be something that is harmful to you emotionally or physically. And I didn't realize that either until I got out of that relationship and realized, "Oh my gosh, the amount of times that I was sexually abused, and that is incredible." And again,
Yeah,
I'm so thankful for Joey and the healing because it's night and day to be
yeah,
with somebody who respects and honors me and in every area is just it's it's indescribable.
yeah.
But that can happen when you're in marriage. So I just want to
Yes.
throw that out there too.
It's important because we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And these conversations, like you just shining a little light, please look into these more, ladies. Like,
Yeah.
to not, if not for you, for someone you know and love.
Yeah.
Be willing to talk about it. Be willing to share a tool like this episode or the book, or any type of any tool you see. Don't be afraid to dive in and just share what could be helpful to someone, because these
Yep.
are not things, again, most don't even know that they're in that situation, and because they've never been, it's not talked about.
Yeah.
And so then they don't know, if you can't get help for something you don't even know you're experiencing. So
Right.
just lean into this conversation in this way. If you're like, huh, I had no idea. Well, that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, I guess how on that note, for those watching, listening who have walked through any type of I'll say an unhealthy relationship, whether
Yeah,
it's a relationship with our parents growing up, where there was dysfunction and maybe we witnessed emotional abuse or a type of abuse, um, or it's just been with someone else. How have you found hope and healing for you now that you are in a healthy relationship? Because I
yeah,
think what happens so often is that we sabotage what's good because all we know is bad. So,
absolutely.
yeah, any helpful tools or tips that women can you want to share so that we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, the first thing really is saying, "All right, Lord, I want to change and I want to get help and I want to heal." And then it's taking steps to do that, even if they're small steps. And if you're fresh out of it, your small step that day might literally be brushing your teeth. It might be calling a counselor or a coach to make an appointment and saying, "Hey, I need to talk to somebody about this." But I think for me, the things that really helped were one, counseling. In coaching, I had a fantastic counselor and have a great coach, and am honored to get to do that for other people now. But I told Joey, and I mean it, I'll be in therapy till I die, because
Me too.
trauma is layers and they come up in different ways. And it's so helpful to have somebody that you can go to and say, "Hey, this is what's going on."
Yeah.
And so that's a big piece of it. Faith was a huge piece of it. The Lord literally helped put things back together. But I think for me, and it's so amazing how God does this, it really was the blessing. I talked
Mhm.
about that before, that was my dad's doctoral thesis that he turned into a book that sold over 2 million copies. And I'm honored and blessed enough to have been on the revised edition, adding
Mhm.
in some practicals on how we can live that out. But when I was in the middle of this, my dad showed up. My family didn't know where I was living. They didn't know what was going on. They knew something was horrifically wrong, but they didn't. I mean, they didn't have all the details at that point. And my dad showed up and he gave me a list of 10 truths about who I was.
Mhm.
And at the time, I didn't even take the paper. I didn't want to take the paper. I did take it. I didn't want to take it. And I remember going home, and my ex-husband would say something, and I'd find myself going into the bathroom and pulling out that paper.
Mhm.
And at first it was like, well, this can't possibly be true. And then it was, gosh, I would love it if that was true. And then it was, well, maybe it can be true. And eventually I was able to hand the paper back to my dad saying, "I believe all of these things,
Mhm.
because this is what God says about me." And my parents, when I finally did come home and they did learn about what happened, my dad, put his hand on my shoulder and just said, "Carrie, it's not about where you've been, it's about where you're going." And he gave me his blessing. And I think for so many of us, the blessing has been missing. Either we didn't
Mhm.
grow up with parents who built attachment into our relationships, or we have experienced some type of relationship that took subtracted. And literally they're in scripture, it's the blessing and the curse. And blessing literally means to add value, like adding a coin to a scale, or to bow to someone because they're so valuable. And curse, the word curse literally means to dam up the stream. So to withhold life-giving water from people. And for so many of us, we've had the curse spoken over us, or in our lives, and it's erased that feeling of blessing, that sense of blessing. And so for me, it really was saying, okay, it starts with the Lord. I have his blessing. I have a God that's crazy about me, and then being able to receive that from somebody else. And that's not easy, especially when you've been hurt. And I did try everything I could to sabotage healthy things, and even with Joey, because it was so foreign. But again, that's where you have to have those tools to be able to say, "I need help," because I don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to go back to relationships that are going to continue to subtract. I want to be with someone who is whole and healthy and who sees me that way. Joey never saw me as broken. He saw me as who I was created to be.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard and it's healing, but it is just incredible how the Lord has just pieced so much back together.
Mm.
And Joey's a big piece of that.
Wow. What we believe really does actually impact what we do,
Yep.
right? So there yeah, if you're watching or listening like, I don't know that I believe that God calls me good, that God loves me that much, that he calls me redeemed, that he cares about me, that he hasn't left me. Like, I don't know that I believe any of that. I don't even know what I believe. Like, if that's
Yeah.
you, that's a great place to start. And just go to the links below, because everything that Carrie has been mentioning is all right there. Take a
Yeah.
next step, whether it's calling the domestic abuse hotline, whether it's grabbing the Merge for Marriage, the blessing, the whatever, all of
Yeah.
that is below. So just do something today.
Yeah.
Start somewhere to understand. Also, we have free Bibles. If you need a Bible, we'll send you
Yep.
anything you need, but just don't keep going as though you didn't hear this.
Yeah.
I think that's like super tempting, so don't do that. Um, yeah, Carrie, thank you. There's like so many other avenues that I could go down with you, but it's already been almost an hour. So so would you mind, if you have any last thoughts, feel free to share them. Otherwise, would you pray for the wives?
Yeah. I just want to again repeat what you said because I think it's so important. And again, more of the same never brings change. And so this does not need to be a 180 today. Start small, do something small, something specific. And right now, think about what that small specific thing is. And maybe it is clicking on a link, maybe it is calling, making that phone call, whatever that small specific thing is that the Lord is putting on your heart. That's what you need to do today to really take action out of this. And it's those small things done continually that really can lead to change. So that would be my encouragement. And then, yes, I'd be honored to pray. Um, and I love this. And I love the way that you're encouraging your audience too. It's fun to get to listen to these
Mhm.
podcasts and the way that you're helping bless others as well. So
Mhm. Thank you.
thank you for what you're doing, Amanda.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Lord, I just pray for everyone listening today, God, that wherever they're at, whatever they're experiencing, that this would be a moment where you just speak hope over them. Lord, hope that things are not going to look this way. Hope that things are not going to stay the same. Hope that they are not stuck. Um, and I also just speak value and life over them, Lord, that they are so valuable, that they are your beloved daughter, that nothing that has been done to them or ever will happen has erased that identity, that they are secure in their identity in you. Lord, and I do just pray for each of the marriages that are listening right now, God, that you would step in and you would heal and redeem and restore any broken place. God, that and you would just pour your life and your love and your unity into that. Lord, and for those that are in abuse, God, I pray that there would be awareness, that you would bring the right people to come alongside them. Lord, you did it for me, and there is no one that you cannot save or reach or heal. And I just, God, help them to see that that's possible, help them to know, and help them to have the courage to take the next step that they need. Um, and again, Lord, we just thank you for the way that you're encouraging and blessing others through Amanda and what she's doing. And we just pray for an increase in that, and that her listeners would just continually be blessed by the content that's being provided, and by her story and the way that she shares so vulnerably as well. So we just love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
Everyone, again, the Merge for Marriage. It's linked below, subtitle Turning Frustration and Disunity into Closeness and Commitment. Thank you for your obedience, Carrie, for writing, for all of the work, the important work that you and your dad and so many more are doing. And we are just grateful for you spending time with us today. And yeah, thank you for your time and sharing with us. We
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much for having me. What a blessing.
Mhm. Thanks everyone for being with us, and we will be back next week for an all new episode.